Today's Movie Verdicts episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare with you, and I am excited for today's episode where I will be joined by my friend and criminal defense attorney Robert Callahan of Callahan and King Law Firm to do a deep dive into the 1992 classic My Cousin Vinny. We will have at least 2 of these movie verdicts episodes each month, and I can share that the next one will be The Lincoln Lawyer. So we are excited about that. Also, don't forget that each Monday is a Monday Mentors episode where we'll visit with a Texas lawyer with an established practice and ask them to share advice on how you can grow as a lawyer and reach your career goals. This past Monday, we talked with Austin-based HOA law expert Gregory Cagle, and it was fantastic. You can catch all of our podcasts on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and at varsitysearch.com/podcasts, and probably most other places you can get podcasts as well. We're still being uploaded into some of them. Finally, if you have suggestions for legal movies we should do on the show, or you have an opinion about anything we talk about in the episode, please tweet at Daniel Hare, H-A-R-E, or send me a message on LinkedIn. You can reach out to Robert on his Facebook page, Justice Waco-Robert Callahan, or at callahankinglaw@gmail.com. All right, without further ado, cook up some magic grits, then kick back, relax, because it's time for My Cousin Vinny.
Rambo, the Terminator, Indiana Jones, Vincent LaGuardia Gambini.
You graduated from law school 6 years ago. What have you been doing since?
Studying for the bar. That's a lot of studying.
Now, didn't I tell you dress appropriately?
You were serious about that?
You're now in contempt of court.
Oh!
You stole his files? Don't worry, I'll find a way to bail you out. The way you handled that judge, oh, you're a smooth talker.
All this over a can of tuna. Fry 'em.
Guy we fried last week took us 3 attempts and his head caught fire.
Whoa!
I think we should meet with the public defender.
The prosecution's case is circumstantial.
Wait a second.
I could do it.
Hey, little Yankee, what?
My biological clock is ticking like this, and the way this case is going, I ain't never getting married.
20th Century Fox presents
What the hell is that?
the most dangerous man in America. Joe Pesci is My Cousin Vinny.
I could win this thing, though. I mean, if I could keep my ass awake and out of jail.
All right, My Cousin Vinny. Robert Callahan's with us.
Hey.
Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, Robert Callahan, Callahan and King Law Firm here in Waco. And this is the inaugural episode of Movie Verdicts on Lone Star Lawyers podcast. And our first one out of the gate here, My Cousin Vinny, a classic.
So good.
It is just so the first thing that you think of when we first even talked about doing this particular movie, what came to mind?
This is my favorite lawyer movie.
Is it? Okay.
It really is. Like, this is the stuttering defense attorney doing the opening statement. Oh my goodness, that you cannot beat that. that is possibly the funniest 2 minutes or 10 minutes, however long that took of TV or film. I mean, that's just hilarious. Love this movie.
Well, it was released in March of 1992, and of course, starring Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei and Ralph Macchio and just a handful of others. It's actually a small cast. I was going through it beforehand. Mitchell Whitfield plays Ralph Macchio's running mate, Stan Rothenstein, and Rothenstein. He gets mad on the pronunciation of his name. I'm going to take some liberties later and talk more about Fred Gwynne, who plays Judge Chamberlain Haller, because I think he's so special, and it was so awesome. That's who I just immediately associate with this movie. And then Lane Smith is the DA, Jim Trotter. But written by Dale Launer, who also wrote one of my favorite movies, not legal, but Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's a great 80s movie with Michael Caine and Steve Martin that if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. And also Love Potion No. 9, which is not my thing, but I know a lot of people like it. It's kind of a cult hit. And directed by Jonathan Lynn, who also wrote and directed Clue from the 80s, another great movie that I've been thinking about lately just because Knives Out, which I've not seen yet, looks like kind of a 2019 version in some ways of Clue. And he actually studied law, and so it was important to him to have this movie reflect realities of law practice, which, as we'll get into in a little while, I think most practitioners, judges, and others feel like this is a movie that closely traces the realities of law practice, maybe as good or better than any others. It's a 7.6 on IMDb and 86, 87 on Rotten Tomatoes. So both audiences and critics like it. It was 14th on ABA's top 25 legal movies. You mentioned it's your favorite legal movie. Of course, I think Marisa Tomei, probably one of the most known roles for her. I mean, she's been around now for, 25 years, but won an Oscar. We'll talk about her in a little bit as well.
I think this is my favorite role that she's ever done. I
mean, yeah, she makes so much of this movie happen, and just provides a perfect counterweight to Joe Pesci in this. It made $64 million on an $11 million budget, so not bad. As we said, not too many people in it, and not. It's a movie that, just in today's world of movies, Marvel and Disney and everything else, this is just one of those that's just sort of, it's good writing, it's good acting, and not a lot of money put into it otherwise. And so it's kind of fun to watch that. Filmed mostly in Georgia and takes place in a fictional county in Alabama. So a lot's kind of going on at this time, but let's talk about that, kind of the backdrop of this movie. And the first thing I noticed when I watched it back the other night was the protest around the jail.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I'd really maybe thought about much or picked up on when I watched it originally when it first came out. That you had this protest trying to save a guy who's on death row. It's not a character in the movie other than it's sort of just there in this backdrop. Just especially as a criminal defense lawyer, how did that strike you in this setting?
It's remarkably woke. I don't know whether that was an intentional thing on the part of the director, or if that was part of a storyline that maybe got cut out. I did a little bit of digging, not necessarily on that issue, but I was reading around, and it seems like there was some conversation about there was going to be more about the execution of one of the inmates. Yeah. And some of that got cut out, but in particular, I can't remember the name of the inmate, but there was going to be a line about "there goes somebody" after there was some buzzing.
Right. Yeah. Norton. It's on the some of the posters that the people have outside the jail, and then they talk about him a couple of times throughout the movie. But yeah, at the time, this is 1992, so I went back to look, and at the time, 36 states had some version of the death penalty, 14 didn't. And now, all these years later, it's down to 25 that have it, 21 don't. 4 have issued governor moratoriums. And so it's sliding in that direction. But yeah, and of course, the other piece to it is it's at that time and in that setting, death by electric chair, which, we talk and hear so much today about lethal injection and its constitutionality and so forth, that I actually didn't realize until I was just researching for this, that there are still states that will use the electric chair. Tennessee executed a prisoner just in December by electric chair. Now only a few states have it, and most don't use it, but that was interesting as I was kind of looking into this. 1992, The number one song out on the pop charts is Mr. Big, To Be With You. So where that puts you.
One who wants to. Yeah, man.
Some of our listeners weren't maybe born or like, their parents were listening to it. Like, what's happening?
That is prime freshman year awkwardness of high school for me.
John Boyega was born that same week that this movie was released, and of course is now Finn in the newest trilogy of Star Wars. And then candidate Bill Clinton is rolling through the Super Tuesday primaries on his way to upsetting everyone and winning the Democratic nomination and then the presidency. So an interesting time. And like you said, the death penalty stuff was sort of ahead of its time. Yeah. But it's just kind of fun to kind of think about this movie in that context, and just kind of then,
did you know, I was looking this up, apparently, when I was watching this again, I never really noticed there's a huge age difference between Joe Pesci's character and Marisa Tomei's character.
Well, it was noticeable watching it this time for me.
Yeah.
And I was watching it thinking, it's one of the, I was to save it, but it's one of the things where like, does this really make sense that they're together?
Right. Yeah. So I did a little bit of math. This is the only math I can do. And so I'm done for the year with this. But Joe Pesci is now 76. Marisa is now 55. And so if those are true numbers, then that means at the time of filming, Joe was 48, Marisa was 27. And they look it. That was my guess.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Right. And we're going to do all kind of spoiler alert for our next episode, which is The Lincoln Lawyer, which is a total almost opposite movie to this in so many ways, but yet the connecting point happens to be Marisa Tomei.
Yeah.
That was not by design. I realized it as we were getting ready. It's like we have the one link, and then
two, because I was thinking, I found myself like, how is Dan a genius? Because
no.
The judge is Judge Haller.
Oh, and then we've got Mickey Haller.
Yeah. And I was like, I started Googling it everywhere. I was like, oh my goodness,
No, I realized that after we planned it that Marisa Tomei was going to be the link. But I was also, and the juxtaposition of that is, okay, I buy Marisa Tomei with Matthew McConaughey.
Right.
Like, that looks right to me. Like, Marisa Tomei with Joe Pesci doesn't quite look right.
That's tough. That's hard.
It is. I mean, you think about, okay, let's throw Marisa Tomei in with Joe Pesci in the newest movie that he's out with De Niro and those guys that are in the
Irishman.
The Irishman, which is amazing, by the way. And that would be interesting altogether. But they could de-age him and make it look more with the de-aging technology. They did not have that in 1992, obviously. So
another fun fact, I was looking on BuzzFeed. Apparently, Will Smith was up for the role of Rothenstein.
Yes, I saw that. Can you imagine what this movie would have been with Will Smith? Because one of the things that was interesting is, you have Pesci, who's an amazing actor, obviously an Oscar winner, and Marisa Tomei was going to win an Oscar here. Ralph Macchio is a superstar at this time because he's coming off Karate Kids and being part of the pack, from the group of all those guys kind of in the late 80s. And yet, in this movie, while he's a central character in a lot of ways, he really doesn't have that big of a role.
It's understated.
And in some ways, Rothenstein's character has a larger role. He's kind of more moving the story forward and going with the public defender and then back, and kind of the one pushing back on whether to use Vinny, at all. An interesting group for sure. This is actually not a movie that I would have seen in the theater. I would have been 14, and my parents were strict about movies growing up, and so
same.
This movie does have a lot of F-bombs.
Yeah. I should have counted them.
Well, I'm sure that's one thing I did not look up, but I think I saw a few places where people were saying how many, like in Google when I was Googling stuff, how many F-bombs are in this movie. And so, so I didn't see it till later on, and I think I started catching it when it was on Google Assistants hopping in with some knowledge, dropping dimes. I think it was started to get some run on cable back in the day, like on whatever TNT or USA or one of those cable channels where it just got over and over and over again, and you start catching, is the judge about to go off on one of them, or something, and you start watching it. Google Assistant's trying to tell me about how many F-bombs are in the movie.
Hey, one thing I did count was the log hauling truck. Did you catch
tell me
that
about
joke?
that. No,
okay,
go.
so I don't remember where I heard this, but I had heard that there was sort of a ongoing joke with the log hauling truck, and if you watch it, you'll see that truck shows up. It's almost the first vehicle you see. It's like the second vehicle you see. They pass it, and then it shows up in the town several times. It's kind of doing like a circuit almost. So it shows up 4 different times, and it's a funny little backdrop. I mean, I think that they nailed. I grew up in the South, so Louisiana, Oklahoma, family in Texas, and I get these run of state highways and things like that. So I mean, I think they absolutely nailed the setting and the background feel.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think it was the one part. Also, we were talking earlier about kind of Joe and Marisa is like, does that make sense? The other thing is, it's funny how the whole reason the movie even takes place is because these two guys are crisscrossing the country from New York to LA, and they're taking a route down through the South.
Why?
Which, I mean, the best I see explanation is it was the wintertime and trying to avoid like the snowy, icy Midwest roads. Okay. But like, I mean, like the whole idea of them just, we'll go through rural Alabama on our way out to UCLA on scholarships. Like it was sort of a weird, I mean, I didn't think much of it the first few times I watched it, but I was just kind of looking back at it this time. It's like, that's interesting. And how the whole thing starts. So obviously that's the start of the plot. They and I should have said this at the beginning. If you haven't seen My Cousin Vinny, go watch it and come back and listen to this because we're going to spoil it for you. And also, if you're in the legal field, this is just a movie you need to have seen and need required watching. Yeah, it's required. As are hopefully most or not, if not all of these movies that we're going to do on here. So Ralph Macchio and who I already forgot the guy, other actor's name, Mitchell Whitfield. So they're rolling through Alabama on their way out to LA. They pull over into the
Sack of Suds.
It's a great name for a convenience store. It sounds like a laundromat, but it's a convenience store. And they buy a bunch of groceries, haul them out there. Ralph Macchio forgets that he's got a can of tuna in his pocket because he couldn't fit it on top of the stack of groceries, whatever. And then they get pulled over thinking that it's the tuna. Yeah. The shoplifting of the tuna.
Yeah. The 31-cent tuna.
Right. And then they, of course, are being hauled in actually on a murder charge because someone in the same car had come in and murdered the guy at the Sack of Suds, the clerk. And we go through a pretty, I want you to talk about this because we go through like a fairly lengthy, set of the movie where they don't exactly tell him what he's being arrested for or charged with. Right. And they just assume it's the tuna.
Right.
And which creates a very hilarious set of back and forth where, Ralph Macchio is just like, I mean, I just, I didn't think much about it. I'm sorry. I can give it, it's just like this whole, like what you would say about taking a thing of tuna when the cop, the sheriff is thinking about murder.
Yeah. No, as a criminal defense attorney watching this, I realized this is the first time that I've watched this movie as a criminal defense attorney. I watched it so many different times, just early in life. And then when I was a prosecutor, I watched it all the time. But I see it through different eyes now. And so this is a segment that I'd like to call The Fifth Amendment with Callahan and King. Shut up. I was cringing the whole time. He's nailing this guy down. He's like, okay, and then what did you do? He's like, well, then we went in and then what'd you do? And, and he's just giving him all these details. And then, at the end, he's like, so when'd you shoot the clerk? And then there's this great, misunderstanding that gets used against him, twisted against him because it's all being typed by a stenographer instead of recorded, with a voice recorder. But there's this, moment where he says, I shot the clerk, with a New York accent, I shot the clerk. And then the guy's like, yeah, what did you do or whatever? He's like, I shot the clerk. And he's like, whoa, realizing what they're being accused of, but the way it comes out on paper is he's confessing I shot the clerk.
Yeah, it's like there's this like in his inflection of his voice, there's this tiny little question mark at the end. I shot the clerk?
Yeah.
But it's just light enough that the sheriff already has it in his head that he's confessing, and so he's just hearing it as a period at the end of that sentence. Yeah. I shot the clerk.
This is, one of the first things I tell my criminal clients when they get booked into the jail is you have the right to remain silent. Use it. This is like, you never know what little detail or what little misstatement is going to be used against you and how it's going to be twisted against you later. So this is a great example of why you shouldn't be talking to law enforcement without having an attorney present.
Yeah, no question. Well, we're going to go through a few just categories here that'll be most of them consistently on that we roll all these movies through to the extent we can. And we kind of want to build this up to ultimately give an overall verdict on this movie, and we'll get there at the end. But the first thing we go through is talking about what, and I'll give you mine, and I may have some of these categories, and Robert, you may not, and you may have some for some of these that I may not, because I don't have something for everything here. But the best admission of evidence or testimony, I think, is just getting Marisa Tomei on the stand as a counter expert late in the movie, when they have the state has introduced an expert witness who's an FBI technical guy who's analyzing some tire tracks and has put the whole crime scene kind of through the FBI machine and come out the other end saying this is what it's got to be. And but then getting her on the stand because she's an expert at General Auto knowledge and has been a mechanic and all that, and just kind of on the heels. I think we're just maybe a year or two after Daubert and kind of what's required of an expert witness. But it was really cool to watch. Then the DA take her through essentially in front of the jury, which was a little bit weird,
right? But
take her through, an exercise to establish her credentials and her expertise. Yeah. Which, he probably, I'm sure he wished he would have excused the jury before he did that, because when she wound up demonstrating her expertise, it wound up backfiring. But
we
that
actually,
was really cool.
in law school, we use this in evidence as an example of how to do a Daubert hearing. Yeah. I don't know if you had that, because we both went to the same law school. We both went to Baylor Law School, had Gerald Powell for evidence, and we actually watched, this is the day where they roll the TV in, like when you're in elementary school. Right. We get to watch a movie.
Right,
and,
right.
We actually watched this scene, and it's great. It's very accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I want to go to unless do you have anything else on that? Go.
For me, the thing that was incredibly accurate for me, and this is a little bit of a dig, but so there's the scene where they get ready to call the expert from the FBI to testify about tread patterns and all that other stuff.
Right.
Surprise witness, and Gambini jumps up and he objects. He goes up to the bench and he says, "Your Honor, I object to this witness being called at this time. We've been given no prior notice that he testified, no discovery of any tests he's conducted or any reports he's prepared. And as the court is aware, the defense is entitled to advance notice of any witness who will testify, particularly those who will give scientific evidence, so that we may properly prepare for cross-examination, as well as give the defense an opportunity to have the witness's reports reviewed by a defense expert who might then be in a position to contradict the veracity of his conclusions." And the judge says, "Mr. Gambini, that is a lucid, well thought out, intelligent objection." And he says, "Thank you." And the judge says, "Overruled."
Yeah.
That is the essence of what it's like to be a defense attorney in court. When the state's just getting their way on home territory. I thought that was incredibly accurate. I thought that was great.
Can we play that real quick? I've got that clip pulled up, and it's just so good. It's worth hearing for sure.
I object to this witness being called at this time. We've been given no prior notice he'd testify. no discovery of any tests he's conducted or reports he's prepared, and as the court is aware, the defense is entitled to advance notice of any witness who will testify, particularly those who will give scientific evidence so that we could properly prepare for cross-examination, as well as to give the defense an opportunity to have the witnesses' reports reviewed by a defense expert who might then be in a position to contradict the veracity of his conclusions.
Mr. Gambini?
Yes, sir.
That is a lucid, intelligent, well-thought-out objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Then he walks back and just kind of shrugs. What can you do?
And you know what's interesting too? So that, and we'll get to a couple of the scenes that lead to that, but that come before it in the chronology. But it is interesting too to see his transformation from those initial, like the arraignment component, and then some other preliminary, and even the beginning of the trial, to this part where the judge is obviously taking a little bit more of a liking to him and appreciating that he's getting better. And in fact, that's why that was so, I saw it's such a powerful piece right there, is the judge just acknowledging that after all your screw ups over the last however many days, that was as good of an objection as you can make. I'm still overruling you.
But good job.
but good job.
One of the things that I appreciate too, as I was doing some research, apparently the director at one point wanted Vinny's character to be dyslexic. And that was the explanation for sort of his, being a little bit slow. And I guess they ultimately had trouble figuring out how to demonstrate that 1992 technology or whatever have you. And so, but yeah, just the idea that he's kind of a goof off just for the sake of being a goof off, or he's just dumb for the sake of being dumb. I never really paid attention to that before, but noticed it sort of this time through. Yeah. And I do, though, I can appreciate this scene and just some other little subtleties of the courtroom. As a defense attorney, I almost feel like Lynn had to have studied under a defense attorney to see kind of how the scales seem to be tipped against you when you're in a court of law as a defense attorney. It's amazing.
No doubt. So best argument or cross-examination. So there were several in this movie. I think, he crosses really all three of the prosecution's primary witnesses, and they're different and very different, but also each unique and important in their own way. So you've got the one guy who supposedly was an eyewitness, seeing them flee the scene after the shooting happened in the sack of suds,
Mr. Tipton.
Yeah,
Grits guy.
Oh no, so you got the Grits guy. Yeah, you got the Grits guy. You got the guy that sees through his muddied up window, and the trees and everything else, and so and then you've got the older lady with the glasses who can't see, and so he just kind of takes each of them apart. I think the Grits one is my personal favorite. I do have that one pulled up on the clip, so we can do that. But we can talk about the others too.
Instinct grits?
No self-respecting Southerner uses instant grits. I take pride in my grits.
So, Mr. Tipton, how could it take you 5 minutes to cook your grits when it takes the entire grit-eating world 20 minutes?
His face just totally melts here.
I don't know. I'm a fast cook, I guess.
I love it.
I'm sorry, I was all the way over here. I couldn't hear you. Did you say you're a fast cook? That's it?
That's it?
Yeah.
Are we to believe that boiling water soaks into a grit faster in your kitchen than on any place on the face of the earth?
I don't know.
Well, perhaps the laws of physics cease to exist on your stove. Were these magic grits? I mean, did you buy them from the same guy who sold Jack his beanstalk beans?
Here comes the objection.
Yeah. Objection sustained.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
Ignore the question.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I don't know.
I think you made your point.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I may have been mistaken.
Hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Just the premise of this movie that the not guilty relies or ultimately comes down to discrepancy in the grits cooking time. And, and some testimony about the skid marks, which most jurors probably wouldn't understand, even though I think that was broken down pretty well.
Yeah.
I love it. And have you seen the spoof video of My Cousin Vinny Inception?
No.
And so they do like this. They make it into a courtroom drama kind of a thing. Oh. And that part where he, gets tipped in with his back against the wall and he says, "You sure about that 5 minutes?"
Yeah.
So they do the Inception, it's fantastic.
That's great. Yeah. I definitely need to watch that.
No, love that cross. I think my favorite cross though is actually how he treats the little old lady, Mrs. Riley.
Yeah.
Because
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, because I think that this is actually a great example of how to treat a witness who just has a sweet and kind demeanor, but you still got to cut her up.
Yeah.
And, how do you go about doing it? And impeaching her perception with the distance and the tape measure. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, because I watched this movie, for all you young attorneys out there, I actually used that in a courtroom one time. Mm. When I was a prosecutor, we had a case that was a DWI, and actually it was a DWI fatality. And the issue was whether or not, believe it or not, the car was a deadly weapon. And so we got testimony that the victim was thrown more than 100 feet from the car. So we actually got a tape measure and pulled it from the witness seat out of the courtroom, clear into, if you've ever been in the McLennan County Courthouse, 3rd floor, all the way to the other side to the rotunda. Yeah. And, no objections drawn. Judge let us do it, probably because I was a prosecutor. Right. But yeah, it was a great cross-examination. A little bit dangerous unless you taken time to sit down with the witnesses in advance and nail down what their testimony is going to be, which is what he did, and that's great. Yeah, no,
and you mentioned about her and kind of the sweet witness who you have to be careful, right? Because the jury's watching. They're her, she's them. Yeah. It's especially small rural town. He's the Yankee from out of town and with an edge. Yeah. And so, and all three of the witnesses, she was the sweetest. Yeah. But all three of them were really still in that sort of ballpark of like, they're not hostile. They're not like, they're well-meaning. Right. And so you have to figure out a way to, on the merits, take them down, and in a way that doesn't make them, look dumb or look belittled in front of their peers, because the jury's going to feel that. Yeah. Right. Yeah, for sure. And like you said, in a small town where like they probably know this witness. Oh yeah. Right. So yeah, no, yeah. Oh, and just so I want to make sure that for people who haven't seen it in a while, just remembering that, so she says she saw, saw them coming out of the sack of suds, and she has these really thick glasses, and so he takes her through how many layers of glasses has she had over the years, how many times has she had to get thicker glasses over the years, and she can't remember, and then she says however many dozen or six, however many, and then it's he's trying to establish that she says it's 100 feet from where she was to where they were, and he has a tape measure that only goes 50 feet, basically the back of the courtroom. Right. Yeah. So it's double, it's half of what is actually the distance. And so then he's holding up fingers and having her call out fingers. And the little comedic part at the beginning is the judge. Yeah. The judge blows it up. I'm telling you, I just, there's so many great, but the judge for me in this movie is just the whole thing, really. Yeah. Let the court reporter note that the counsel's holding up two fingers. Yeah. It's just like, Judge, come on. It's the first time that he kind of said, "Oh, yeah, sorry."
And now Miss Riley, and only Mrs. Riley,
gives him a look. Yeah. And at this point, it's far enough along where there's some type of mutual respect going on between the judge and Vinny, which has developed at this point. Yeah, yeah. That at the beginning would not have been there. We'll see a couple of those clips here in a minute, but yeah, that part is just great.
Now, are you going back to Mr. Tipton, the grits guy? Did you know about Grits for Breakfast, the blog? there is a great defense attorney blog.
Yes, I know about it.
And it's basically just, keeping people apprised of what's going on in different sections, mostly in Texas.
Right.
But I don't know who he is. I feel like I heard his name one time. Maybe he's out of Austin, but I mean, he is very savvy. And obviously his website's inspired by that cross-examination. I think that this cross-examination is one of the things, if you grew up in the 90s, there's probably like 80% of the attorneys that became attorneys in between the years of like 2000 and 2010 became attorneys because of this scene.
Well, and I think also a key part of the grits thing is that it's referring also back to earlier in the movie where, I mean, they've never heard of grits until they get there.
Yeah.
To defend these two kids. We didn't say Marisa Tomei's name in this, which is Mona Lisa Vito. Mona Lisa Vito. And, so it's only when they go to breakfast in the local diner that, and they order off the menu, which just says breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Yeah.
And you don't see it at first. That's a great little scene where they give them the menu and they open it up and you're not seeing the menu. You're seeing it from behind. And so you can't see it. And they actually act like they're studying it, like, breakfast? Yeah. I got breakfast. It would happen to be grits, bacon, and eggs.
You know what I never thought of before until now? It's a metaphor. They're leaving the north, they're coming down south, and they're immersing themselves in this culture that they don't know anything about. They've never heard of grits, right? And then they learn more about grits and how that works. And as he's learning about the legal system and the process, and then eventually it becomes the grit that saves this kid. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but there's a lesson. Yeah, there's definitely a lesson in absorbing the community that you're operating in and being able to connect. I mean, the fact of being able to connect with those jurors and that witness over something like grits, which he couldn't have done 2 weeks prior. Yeah. And the same thing with the mud in the tires, right? So several things that were sort of culturally relevant to them in the South, but that the people coming down from New York had not thought of or knew about before.
And I'll tell you what, true story, because I lived in Washington State. My father was Air Force, and so we were all over the place. I lived in Washington State for 5 years, and no one up there had heard of a grit.
Yeah.
No one. So, it's accurate.
Yeah. Best use of a procedural or evidentiary rule. So on this, for me, one of the things that stuck out for me is, particularly with where we are now, Vinny is trying to figure out how to stay on top of things. He's panicking, and he's like, man, if I could just get a look at Trotter's files, Trotter, the DA, if I could just get a look at those files, that'd really help.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to sweet talk the guy into, and he's going to go hunting with him to develop some rapport. So maybe he'll share the files with him. And he comes home all proud because in the car, he just mentions it to them. And Trotter calls up his assistant and says, hey, will you copy all the files in this case? And he's feeling proud about himself that he won him over, and they gave him the files. Comes home to have Lisa say, he has to turn it over. Yeah. It's disclosure. It's right here in the book.
You didn't have to shoot a deer.
Shoot a deer. You're going to shoot. Oh, yeah. Oh, that scene is worth watching. Her little whole thing about the deer is really great. You're a little doe. You swim to a little brook.
Blam!
Blow your eyes out. So good. But but thinking about Brady and the Michael Morton Act, and just think about like where we are now versus where we were then. And I mean, Brady was there, but not Michael Morton, obviously. And so the turning over of evidence and files from the state to the defense, and just interesting to kind of watch them stumble upon that in different ways.
Yeah, and this movie also just makes me realize, how good, I say good, we have it, but just how much better things are with the Michael Morton Act in particular. Those that don't know, Rule 3914 Code of Criminal Procedure, based on the atrocity of a wrongful conviction of a man named Michael Morton for the death of his wife. Come to find out, I think after 18 years that he spent in prison, that he didn't commit the crime. He was exonerated. And because of that, we have this rule now. And in the course of overturning his case, it became clear that the district attorney at that point in time was being alleged of withholding evidence intentionally and kind of cooking the case in order to get their conviction. And so a lot of lawmakers in Austin inspired to change the law. And so now we have expansive discovery rules in Texas. And it makes you appreciate it because, I mean, it was the dark ages before that. I mean, we had to sit down, and write everything out or type everything out, inside the district attorney's office. And just different times. But it's crazy. I loved the voir dire of Miss Vito.
Yeah.
So,
we mentioned it earlier, but that was so good.
Yeah.
Right.
The prosecutor, goes back and starts asking her questions. And I mean, he does a really good job of initially challenging her credibility. He asked that one question too many on cross, and that's a rule. You never ask a question that you don't know the answer to.
Right.
And the question was something to the effect of, how does your family being your mechanics, make you knowledgeable or something like that. And then, she goes off and just walks through this door that he opened up and tears it open.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. We'll I think we've got that clip here in a little bit too, of her on this. Well, I think we've got the clip of her on the stand actually giving the testimony after that. But we talked earlier about the old woman with the demonstration. So a category we'll have on here is best courtroom demonstration, and for me that was it. Getting up there and doing that. Is there another one that was there another courtroom demonstration that stood out to you? I couldn't think of another one, but
what I thought was interesting was when Gambini is asleep.
Yeah.
During one of the hearings, and there's this case out there that talks about, ineffective assistance of counsel and what does and doesn't qualify as ineffective assistance of counsel. I forgot to look this up. I can probably find it fairly quickly, but there was actually a lawyer that was asleep at the table, and the person that was convicted on appeal said, "Look, my lawyer wasn't even awake. Surely that's grounds for me to have my case overturned." And it was actually it was a death sentence case. It was Calvin Gerald Bourdin, sentenced to death by a Houston jury in 1984. This is according to the Washington Post for the stabbing death of a former roommate. His court-appointed attorney, who died in 1998, was a notorious attorney in Houston for nodding off in courtrooms. And the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit voted to reinstate the death sentence, stating that the fact that on this record, we cannot determine if Cannon slept during the critical stage of Bourdin's trial. Barksdale wrote, the ruling reinstated a death sentence thrown out last year by a lower federal court. Of course, our rejecting Bourdin's claim should not be understood as condoning sleeping by defense counsel during a capital murder trial or any other trial for that matter.
Right.
Good disclaimer. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. There's a lot of little hints of interesting, real courtroom stuff here.
Yeah, no, for sure. Best objection, I think we covered that one. The good objection from Vinny earlier. Did you have anything for best prep work or discovery moment, investigative work?
I love how he goes to the different witnesses and, he's taking pictures with the little Polaroid camera.
Yeah.
And all that stuff ends up being useful later. And this is Mr. Grant's was the one where he's, what is all this stuff on the window?
Yeah.
And then he has a good cross later. And that stuff, I mean, you really can't put a value on the value of going and getting your hands dirty going to crime scenes, going talking to witnesses, checking out the perspective, same conditions, same time of day, same lighting, all that kind of stuff to the extent possible, and seeing that firsthand. Like there's just so many things that you'll find in a case, and so he wouldn't have had that if he had just relied on the fact that the police report said A, B, and C, and that must be what it is. He wouldn't have those good pictures in that cross-examination. So
yeah, that guy. I won't remember all of them here offhand, but yeah, mud on the window. He also had the trees and then the bushes. Yeah. And so how he laid that out to him on the stand was he presented those photos to him that he took with him when he was preparing earlier and whatever. And so he, here's this picture. Is this your house? Is this your window? What is that on the window? It's mud. What are those things?
What are these little things?
Trees. What are those millions of little things on those trees? Leaves? Leaves. And then bushes. And
just yell them out when you know them.
And he gets them to say all of those things. And then what I loved about it was at the end of that cross, he says, now, are you telling me that through all these leaves on all these trees and all those bushes and all that mud,
looping,
pulling it all back in, that you could have seen blah, blah, blah. And he folds on that. Good stuff.
Yeah. And of course, the rule with cross-examination is you're not really so much usually trying to get an answer out of the witness. You're usually talking to the jury.
Talking to the jury.
So, it's great work.
Yeah. All right, I've got so much on best judge moments. We've already talked a little bit about it, but I just feel like I've got to give my man his due. So let's start with the arraignment because I love the arraignment. I just love everything about this. We're gonna play this clip, and we'll. It's just so good. We'll talk about it on the other side.
How do your clients plead?
My clients are caught completely by surprise. They thought they were getting arrested for shoplifting a can of tuna.
What are you telling me? That they plead not guilty?
No, I'm just trying to explain.
I don't want to hear explanations. The state of Alabama has its procedure. Wow. And that procedure at this point in time is to have an arraignment. Are we clear on this?
Yes. But there seems to be a great deal of confusion here.
Mr. Gambini.
See, my clients...
Mr. Gambini.
2 fingers waving him up.
All the way.
All I ask from you is a very simple answer to a very simple question. There are only 2 ways to answer it, guilty or not guilty.
Your Honor, my clients didn't do anything.
Once again, the communication process is broken down. It appears to me that you want to skip the arraignment process, go directly to trial, skip that, and get a dismissal. Well, I'm not about to revamp the entire judicial process just because you find yourself in the unique position of defending clients who say they didn't do it. Now, next words out of your mouth are either going to be guilty or not guilty. I don't want to hear commentary, argument, or opinion. If I hear anything other than guilty or not guilty, you'll be in contempt. I don't even want to hear you clear your throat. I hope I've been clear. Now, how do your clients plead?
So good.
Tough.
I mean, it's just so good.
Because, of course, the next thing he says is, I get the picture.
Yeah, and then he gets thrown in jail.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he, at least twice, maybe 3 times, contempt.
Yeah.
And the last time, we haven't talked about this yet, but he actually wanted to stay in jail.
Roll with it.
So that he could actually sleep.
Yeah.
Because everywhere they're going to sleep,
we got screech owls. We got
something's
trains.
waking them up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The pigs, are,
the whistle,
the pigs, the whistle, the train, the mill, something. And then, of course, the night that he goes to jail, that night, there's some type of riot or sirens, and he's like just sleeping through it.
Yeah.
We don't have I don't have the clip pulled up for it, but his appearance in court, Vinny's, starts off with the leather with no tie, and the judge just hammers him on that. We talked about overruling the objection earlier. when they do put Lisa on the stand and they find, I think it's, they connect the dots that they're engaged and she's his fiance. And he makes the comment, is one of my favorite lines. Well, that certainly explains the hostility.
Yeah. He was great. I didn't realize until later in life that was Herman Monster.
Yeah.
The judge. I mean, this apparently was his last appearance.
And this was his last movie. He passes away soon after from pancreatic cancer. And so this was his last movie. I did not watch The Munsters. I did not know him from that. I love him. He's, just the voice, the expression, everything is so good. The Two Utes is probably the most famous.
So good.
Let's get that real quick.
Is it possible the Two Utes?
To what? What was that word?
What word?
To what?
What?
Did you say Utes?
Yeah, Two Utes.
What is a Ute?
Oh, excuse me, Your Honor. Two youths.
Okay. So, true story. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say the word HOOF. How do you say that word?
What is it?
HOOF. How do you pronounce that word?
Hoof.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Because I had a trial where it was an animal cruelty case, dealt with a horse, and I said hooves at some point, and the judge stops the trial. He's like, "What are you saying?"
What are you saying?
And I asked, hooves? And he says,
"What's a hoof?"
What's a hoof? And I still, I don't know what's right. Is it hoof hoof oxen? I don't know what the word is. He's like, "Oh, you mean hooves?" And
oh my gosh! So he was really going with the double O. Oh man,
I love that.
That's one of my favorites for sure. The Two Utes, and later he's got the Win Some Lose Some. You mentioned he's from the Munsters. He's also got this really, if you like 80s movies, he's got this just very bit role, but he has such a distinct look, and voice, that he was in The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox. He played Donald Davenport, who was the takeover company guy, who was trying to take over the company that Michael J. Fox worked for. And he sat at the top of the end of the conference table and had that same voice, and it's just so striking. Hate to this was his last movie, but gosh, I'm glad that he made it.
Yeah, it's so interesting too how the formality that they emphasize, because I have found it to be true that the smaller the town, it seems like the more formal the judge.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's just that they don't want you taking their courtroom for granted, but there's some great, little bits of accuracy in practice that are all throughout the movie. One of the ones that I love is just how money focused this slick talking, guy from Fast Town, New York is. He won't even fight the guy unless he has the money in hand, He's like, "Hey, little Yankee wuss, you ready to fight? You got the money? I got it." Yeah.
Oh man. Absolutely.
I mean, just a no nonsense defense attorney. Even though this is his first murder case, he knows his way around the courtroom. He knows his way around people. For the most part, I guess you could argue that he doesn't with the whole DA and going hunting and all that stuff.
No, he definitely was a fast learner on the job. And she actually kind of, Lisa, said something to him to the effect of, "I think when you get in there and you start doing your thing, you're going to be great."
Yeah.
And it was kind of like that. Like he had this natural talent. He had the training in there somewhere. And once it kind of finally started to get comfortable for him and he finally started to kind of cut loose, he became a really good lawyer.
Yeah.
And
I think that there is something to be said here about the importance of listening to your wife.
Yeah.
Or listening to that significant other person in your life, because she's trying to help him the whole time.
Yeah, looking for ways to help.
Right.
And ultimately does.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, how many times my wife says some little thing that gives me a little spark of inspiration, helps me see a case that I'm sort of, workshopping with people help me see it in a different way, different light, and just there's something about the intuition that women have, and Lisa Vito, given the opportunity, does some great good for the case, but he won't let her in early on.
Well, and I was reading about how they almost cut her character entirely from this whole movie, and ultimately they add in the scene where she has the rant on the porch.
My biological clock is ticking.
And everybody loved it so much, and he's just sitting there on the porch steaming mad because she's piling onto him at that point.
Which is also somewhat accurate.
No, you understand where he is with it. And so, but that saved the role, and she just makes the most of it, obviously. And let's give her due here. Let's get her on the stand and listen to her solve the... And this is, I should set this up. This is a little risky. He has total confidence in her. She's going to figure it out, but he doesn't tell her what he's trying to get from her until she's on the stand.
No.
So, because she's got the photo of the tire tracks in front of the sack of suds that they're all saying, the DA is saying were made by the kid's car. He's figured out that, and he knows that it couldn't have been made by that car. And he figures she can figure it out, but he's putting her on the spot, on the stand to look at it and figure it out. So here we go.
Ms. Vito, please answer the question. Does the defense's case hold water?
Defense's case was the other side. Yeah.
No. The defense is wrong.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
How could you be so sure?
Because there is no way that these tire marks were made by a 64 Buick Skylark. These marks were made by a 1963 Pontiac Tempest.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we clarify to the court whether the witness is stating opinion or fact?
This is your opinion?
It's a fact.
I find it hard to believe that this kind of information could be ascertained simply by looking at a picture.
Would you like me to explain?
I would love to hear this.
Now he's sitting on prosecutor's table.
The car that made these two equal-length tire marks had positive traction. Can't make those marks without positive traction, which was not available on the 64 Buick Skylark.
And why not? What is
All right,
positive
it goes
traction?
on a little bit here, but I don't want to take it away. That's her line that she's most famous for, the Buick Skylark.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about cars. I have no idea about positive traction. I get the independent suspension and that the tire, they go on to talk about the tires being flat instead of being on an angle, which they would have been in not an independent suspension, I guess, typical suspension. But no, she just dominates it, figures it out, and basically knocks down the FBI experts' opinion that was just given before that. So,
and so fun fact,
good moment.
I was looking up some background, and apparently one of the writers said that he got nailed by his friend who grew up around cars later on. Apparently, a Corsair could also make that tire track. So there's 3 cars that could make that tire track pattern. One is the Skylark, one is the Corsair, and the other one is
the one that she called that. The Tempest.
The Tempest.
The Pontiac Tempest.
Yeah.
Oh, and she does say, one is the Corvette.
Oh, yeah.
Which could not be mistaken.
Yeah.
For the Buick Skylark.
That's funny.
And because it's GM, was it available in mint green? It
metallic.
Metallic mint green condition. Good stuff.
She's, as an actress, she nails it, but, she really does just come save the day.
She's great. I found this since we're still on her. This is the last clip I have. This is Bill Belichick in Deflategate, referencing Lisa.
Embarrassed to talk about the amount of time that I've put into this relative to the other important challenge in front of us. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in footballs. I'm not an expert in football measurements. I'm just telling you what I know. Would not say that I'm Mona Lisa Vito of the football world, as she was in the car expertise.
So good.
Mona Lisa Vito. Just dominating culture all the way up and until Deflategate and Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And he had to actually think of that before he went out there. He didn't just come up with that. So that's really great. So she definitely wins the best non-lawyer assist of the movie. Comes through for him there. Best juror. We didn't have a ton of independent, individual jurors here. I do love the lady who has this big look of pride on her face when the grits guy is saying, "I have pride in my grits," and she just has this big smile on her face. I love that lady.
My favorite is the black guy in the back row. And during the opening statement from the prosecutor, he's talking about, voir dire. Verdict. Verdict. It's a word that comes from all our little old ancestors in England. And they cut over, and it's the black lady in the front row that you're talking about, and then the black guy in the back row, and he's just got his mouth open, what? Whose ancestors?
We should talk about Trotter for a minute because the prosecutor, he's great. I will admit to in high school or early college, maybe I can't remember exactly, mid-90s. He was a featured star on Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman on TV with Terry Hatcher was Lois Lane, and I even forget now who played Superman, Clark Kent, whatever. Dean Cain, is that his name? Dean Cain. But anyway, he played Perry Clark, the publisher of the Daily Planet. Anyway, he was great. Love him. But in this movie, he has this very unique way of when he talks to the jury and he's trying to make a point, he's got those arms up in the air and there's bear claws going on. Identical.
Yeah.
He does that 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
But he's great. He's just got this southern, hometown southern guy who's going to take the visitor from New York out hunting and treat him right, but yet still wants to beat him. And almost seems happy at the end once he knows that they've both got the wrong guys there, but they've also got the right guys, which they figure out down the road. Yeah. So they're not letting anybody get away. So he's happy to have justice reign and let these kids go.
Yeah, Dean Cain, you're right. Yes.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's probably not one I should be throwing out that I actually watched that show, but I did because I'm a Superman guy. So
release your inner nerd. It's okay. This is a safe space. You're good here. No, I loved his character for so many different reasons. I love that they got into sort of his background and the struggle with ethics. It's so common.
Yeah, no, he talked about being a defense lawyer before.
Yeah, and that is a common struggle that people working in the criminal world, criminal defense or prosecution, have to deal with. And so they address that. They talk about that, sort of the elephant in the room. Neither this case nor the Lincoln lawyer, I think, do enough to talk about that spot in between where you can land, where you don't wrestle with the ethics of what you're doing, and yet you're still doing your job and you're doing the right thing. For maybe a discussion at another time, but I did love that they take that up. I love his opening was actually really good.
Yeah.
Up until
talk about that, yeah.
There's a point where, he does. Okay, so the rule of opening is that you are supposed to talk about what the evidence is going to show. That's all you're supposed to be talking about. And so he does a great job of saying the evidence is going to show. The evidence is going to show that defendants Rothenstein and Gambini did X. The evidence is going to show that they enter the sack of suds. The evidence is going to show this and that. He does all that really well, and at the same time he makes it exciting. Yeah. And the opening is short, it's sweet, it's sexy. He gets all the stuff out there. I probably would have stopped at the point that he says, at the end of all this, we're going to ask you to render a verdict of guilty. But then he starts going a little bit far left when he starts talking about, the definition of verdict and where that comes from. That probably is argumentative. But no, this is a great opening.
Yeah.
Only trumped by the opening of Vincent Gambini. You know, everything that guy says, beep, you know. Fantastic.
And speaking of openings, the public defender, bless his heart, the actor is fantastic. He actually plays the judge in Trial and Error, which we might do at some point with Michael Richards and Jeff Daniels and Charlize Theron, and he plays the judge. He's very funny. Austin Pendleton is his name, and apparently it was the scene that amongst the actors and the stage crew and everybody else, it was the hardest for everyone to get through without laughing because it was so funny. The actors, Ralph Macchio, and guys at the table were there were quotas about talking about how if you look behind his shoulder, you're looking from the jury to the public defender giving the opening statement to them kind of behind, and they're sort of out of focus, but you can kind of see them almost like SNL style, Jimmy Fallon style, like trying not to break, because it was so funny. I don't know, like I never quite gathered whether he had an actual like stutter, like that was the way just he had a stutter, or whether he was just had like a strong case of the nerves. Because like now, like on the one hand, like I feel like I can totally laugh if it's just the nerves. But if it's like actual stutter, like you're not, I can't. But so I'm gonna go ahead and just make the choice to believe he's totally normal in every other way, and he just gets nervous when he gets gets up in front of the jury, and that's his mechanism when he does that. So
it's true that doesn't age the same in 2020.
No, that's not great.
No, but oh my goodness,
when he's so funny though.
When he leans forward and puts his hand on the juror as he's trying to get his word out. Oh my goodness!
He reaches out and touches that juror on the shoulder,
and then the fist pump. He's not guilty. It was it's good.
And he's spitting on them. he's spitting on them. And then he ends it. The way he ends it is so perfect, you know. And it just, I mean, it's great. And then when he's walking back to counsel table, and he throws his arm up, like gives a little wave.
Yeah,
he gives a wave.
Nailed it.
And wave to the judge. And was it later? He only gets to do that, and I think he gets to talk to one witness before the kid decides to ditch him and go back to Vinny, but. The witness that he does, he goes back to the table and says, "Boy, he's a tough nut."
Which, again, kids, don't ask a question on cross-examination that you don't know the answer to. You know, he gets tipped up against the wall for half a second. You know, were you wearing your glasses? No, wasn't wearing my glasses. And ha-ha, you know, and then he gets... triumphant. And so he asked the question, how could you possibly see? Well, these is reading glasses.
Reading glasses. Oh. That's the tough nut, the grits guy. And then we get the grits cross from Gambini, and then the public defender loses his job there. Just kind of a few other notes here as we start to wind it down. We talked a little bit about some other little funny things here and there. You mentioned the guy who stiffed Lisa out of the money at the pool hall, and then Vinny goes to get it back a few times, but he never has the money. Keeps saying he has the money, he never has the money. And then finally, Vinny does punch him out. And I was watching it just earlier today. I was going to pull the clip, but I figured we didn't have time for that one. But the way he goes up and punches the guy, he jumps. It was like Little Mac in Mike Tyson's Punch Out. The way he would jump up and hit the bigger,
the Superman
old school video games, original Nintendo, jumping up and punching like Super Macho Man or whatever. He would have to jump and go at an angle. And that's what Vinny looked like going up to punch that guy, which was great.
I love the rhetoric in the pool hall where he's saying, how about I just kick your butt? And he's like, a counter offer. Take some first year contracts.
The counter offer. So you talked about Will Smith was up for the role of Stan Rothenstein, which is Ralph Macchio's running buddy. And also the director initially wanted Robert De Niro for the role of Vinny, but the studio thought Robert De Niro wasn't funny. And it's interesting now, like De Niro makes funny movies. He can be funny. It's a totally different movie. It's a whole thing. But and who knows whether he was actually ever an option, but no, I thought that was interesting. They did make one compromise on the procedures for the laugh and admit it, which is showing Vinny going to see the clients actually in the jail cell. Right, the first time that they and set up a whole scene about that's really funny, where the kid doesn't know that it's the lawyer. I think it's just another convict in there about to hurt him.
Yeah, I think you should be on your knees thanking me. That was a great misunderstanding.
The Utes thing came out of a real conversation between Pesci and the director. The director, I think from Australia, couldn't understand Pesci and when he said Utes and thought that it was so funny they should put it in.
Well, also background, apparently the scene in the jail, those are in the prison, those are actual inmates in the background.
Actual inmates, actual guards in a real jail. Yeah.
All the stuff that they're yelling, they're really yelling it.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. He uses several different names to be able to practice in the court, and he keeps changing it by a syllable or a slight change here and there, so the judge can't quite track down that he's not able to practice.
Gallo. Which, again, his wife
saves him on that.
Comes to the rescue.
Yeah.
And like, gentlemen, shut up and listen to your wives.
Yeah.
Like, they know what they're talking about.
We mentioned earlier that the legal community in general are fans of this movie. Judge Posner on the Seventh Circuit praised the movie and said that it was particularly rich in practice tips, how a criminal lawyer must stand his ground against a hostile judge, because the audience is the jury, not the judge. How cross-examination on peripheral matters can sow serious doubts about a witness's credibility. How to use props effectively. The tape measure was the example. How to voir dire and cross-examine expert witnesses. The importance of Brady. We talked about that. How to dress for trial. Standing up and addressing the judge.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
How about that? I mean, he initially was talking at him from the sitting down, which I know there's state, federal can be different on that. But as you said, in kind of local and state courts, local courts, you're going to see more of that formality or house rules usually. And so knowing what those are. It's cited in more than 24 opinions.
That's crazy.
And so, yeah, just a lot of great stuff. So what do we think? How does this movie hold up now? It's 1992. We're now 2020. Oh, my gosh. I think we said 2019 earlier. 2020 now. I still think it's great. Yeah. There's not a lot that doesn't hold up. It's so good. It was ahead of its time in several ways. We talked about the death penalty and Brady and Morton, Michael Morton Act, and just really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's just a great comedy. It's great courtroom stuff. It really does show the little man going up against the machinery of the system. I think it does a great job of showing what that looks like, all the different pressures that you have on you when you're trying a case. And it just seems like pressure is coming from all different angles and things like that, and how the little things can lead to a bigger break in the case. I will say for all of that, I think that in real life, whether it's 1992 or whether it's today, I mean, these guys are absolutely found guilty. I mean, there's
oh no!
You got three people.
You dropped the bomb on us here at the end.
I mean, hot take, but I mean, you got three people in this small town where everybody knows each other, right?
Right. Oh, here we go.
They all say, we saw these boys do it, right? And then there's a metallic green, mint green Buick Skylark that they see leaving the sack of suds, and the clerk is shot dead, and the tire prints more or less match up. You got slip differential and all that factoring in. But I'm telling you, I just think that a jury does not find reasonable doubt in real life on the discrepancy and possibility of 15 minutes cooking time on the grits on the stove of Mr. Tipton's house, and the little old lady who has gone through several prescription changes, and the wife or the wife to be fiance of the defense attorney saying that there's a problem with the tire tracks. I think that they get found guilty.
That is hot take, and not only did we get we didn't just get a not guilty verdict here. We got a dismissal. Dismiss all charges. And of course, the part that we did have in this movie, which we wouldn't normally have, is a guilty party found with the weapon down the street that the sheriff tracks down.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. Probably take that out. And I think, you're right. Well, all right. So let's give this thing a verdict. So I thought what we would do is, on a scale of 1 to 100, we'll use gavels. So those are our points. So let's give it gavels. How many gavels do you give our first movie that we're going to do here, My Cousin Vinny?
So this is accuracy and just enjoyability.
Yeah, just the whole thing. There are no rules to how you have to judge it, but yeah, I think all those things that we've kind of talked about in the different categories we've hit. What would you give this one?
Man, I'm probably going to give it about 99 gavels. I love this movie.
99
gavels.
Out of 100.
Like, this is the best lawyer movie not necessarily because it's the most realistic, but just in terms of enjoyability and the things that they get right and the little details, the comedy, the cast, the setting, everything. I mean, this is just a win.
It is.
So
that's cool. I'm going to give it 85. I love it. I do. I feel like I've got to. I feel like I've got to give myself room on the top end for some others. Maybe I shouldn't think of it that way. So I'm more just giving myself room to go up than anything else, probably. But I do love it as well, and it's really, really good. But we are going to give the audience a chance to appeal. So we'll put this out, but. So you're at 99, I'm at 85. Collectively, what is that? We're at 92 collectively out of 100.
I've done my math for the month. I'm done.
Yeah. So if you out there are interested in appealing this verdict of 92 between the two of us, let us know if we missed the mark here, which probably means we missed it high, I guess. And let us know. So Daniel at varsitysearch.com, or you can tweet at Daniel Hare, and we'll collect your votes. And next time we'll look and see whether or not we get reversed by the audience here. But I think we're on pretty safe ground here. We may get into some movies later where we're a little more split opinions, but this one's pretty solid across the board. So Robert, thanks for being here with us, man. This is fun.
Yeah.
My Cousin Vinny, classic. Absolutely.